Hi, everyone. Welcome to this micro teaching that is sort of related to our class, but we might also consider it something like a supplement in that one of our conversations the other day had led us into a rather impromptu conversation that nonetheless a lot of folks had followed up with me regarding, and there just seemed to be a general excitement about it. And it was how to go about working on what we might call creative writing, artistic writing. One way of putting it would be non-scholarly writing. And at the same time, that can be a little vague. But the gist that I was getting was that there were some folks who were interested in things like lyrics, poetry, maybe even a novel, that kind of thing. And there seemed to be, understandably, a general kind of real confusion about how could someone possibly do these things while while studying full time or while doing really anything else at all. How can a person working, not even full time, working, I don't know, a certain amount of hours a week, or just generally at this point in history, being extremely stressed out in general, which I think is all of us. How and where does one find the time to work on what we might call aesthetic writing or the literary cognition of the work of art? And I thought that I would take a few minutes to give you some ideas that, if not the second that this video is over, something that you can kind of keep uh, throughout your time at Temple, maybe beyond. Whenever you really want to work on these sorts of things, and let's say your life is not really conducive to it. You don't have a summer program that you're going to with fellow writers that absolutely cater to this sort of thing, or even if you are in a creative writing program or you envision yourself, I should say, as going into one, and you might want to work on some things to build a portfolio to even apply to one. I thought that I would share some of my advice here so that you can um, maybe get a clearer picture of what the process could be like. Some advice that I kind of wish that I had. As we had mentioned, I have written a work of, we could say, maybe literary fiction or philosophical literature, something along those lines. I guess it's been described a few ways. That's in Charles now. And it's a 3-volume Künstlerroman, which is an artist novel. And there will also be a prose poem that I wrote and a work of philosophy or literary theory on Flannery O'Connor and medieval philosophy. And the book is itself about the literary work of art. So some of you had noticed that, and I certainly could not pretend, while I won't pretend to have the greatest advice in the world, I may be able to offer some things because these books that I was writing, while I don't think there was really a point when I was a full-time, or even if I was a full-time student, it wouldn't be while I was doing work. So don't go getting any crazy ideas. But when you have the time, even like I said, in the breaks coming up or the summer, and you really have an idea, be it for any type of, let's say you don't even know what it is, but you feel you're reading literature or writings for your course, you're getting a cathartic experience out of it. You are walking around thinking to yourself, I want to do something with these thoughts I have. I want to put them down because maybe the way that I'm seeing it, I'm not seeing anyone put the thoughts this way anywhere else. I think some friends perhaps have complimented you on some work that you shared with them. Maybe you've already taken a creative writing course and it went really well and you're thinking about getting back into it. And so here are some of my notes that I hope can be helpful. The first thing is we talked about, or I mean, we talk about the types of writing and creative writing. Um, Everyone's different, of course, which is certainly true when it comes to writerly advice. And so creative writing, it's a kind of blanket term. It is what it is. I don't know how much I like putting it that way. But nonetheless, one wants to define creative writing. If it's something that you want to try different mediums, like maybe write a one-act play, then maybe the next month write a chapbook of poetry. As in the film Scarface, the world is yours. I would at the same time perhaps recommend, if you're going to do that, maybe with something like by the end of the year, reflect upon the different areas that you have engaged in this aesthetic competition composition in, and think, does one seem to you to stand particularly strong now that some time has passed? And to that note, I always have a period of what I call the incubation period. And what I mean by that is, for any given work, let's say there's been a lot of writing done in a week. Um, by the end of that week, I think this is a human condition. This isn't just uh, my own subjective idea, but this seems to be generally a human thing. Whenever we finish doing something, for the most part, it feels pretty great. All of the ideas, no matter how they actually look objectively, have just poured out of our heads. It feels good. I know I go through this a lot, actually, sometimes with scholarly writing, but much more with poetical writing. And I have learned that to take that and go rush off with it, it is much better for all parties involved, to go through the incubation process. Give the work at least a week, I would say, to sit, live your life for a week, go out, if possible, don't even think about it, whether it's 1 page or 20 pages. Really let it sit. And you want to get into a frame of mind that when you go back to it, as painful as this can be, and I really do speak from experience here, go back to it and try to objectively read it and say, do I have something here? Am I going in the wrong direction? Do I even not want to show this to anyone? That can be tricky because you could go into this state where maybe there actually is something good there, and if you don't show anyone, um, that can be its own sort of mystery, like a tree falling and no one hears it. Does it actually fall? If a book is written and no one ever knows that it's written, but the author is convinced that it's shabby and never does anything with it, well, in that case, we're kind of banking on a sort of Kafka experience where we hope we have a friend Max that can unlatch the trunk when we're gone. But we want something more than that, I think, right? Something more than posthumous success. Um, and so some would say then, on writing or not writing every day, especially when you have other things going on, I think this is key. If you're working, if you're studying, let's say part-time, or you and any mix of experiences going on, um, you're essentially, unless I guess you're writing professionally and you signed a contract for a book and it's just what you do, you're going to be thinking, I'm doing other things, and then the writing comes in. And this is tough too when, let's say, you don't have a contract for a book. You have no idea if anyone's going to read it, let alone publish it. And so you're thinking, how much spare time or whatever do I want to carve out to do this work? And I would say, rather than have a really firm thing set in stone there, to kind of do kind of follow your heart in a way. And I don't say that out of inexperience or to just kind of want to say pleasant things, but I mean, really, like when it comes down to your sanity in your life, you may have a great idea, but if you add in too many hours of it with too many other things, it gets really into that sort of intellectual sensitivity of, could it end up hurting the writing if I'm trying to simply, it's like a Herculean endeavor. Am I trying to do too much? If that is the case and the schedule is busy, but you nonetheless want to start this sort of writing, I personally recommend the mornings. Um, of course, if we're not morning people, this is going to be difficult, but I would say, even if you're not, to consider the option of even setting aside an hour in the morning. You could also, and I actually find this is more conducive, although it may technically be kind of bad advice, and it would be to see how you feel every morning. There are times where I think I want to go. I do some of my work at the Athenaeum in Philadelphia, and their private library is there. And I have a project that I'm working on. When all of my work is absolutely done with other things, I go there and I research and I write a lot by hand, by pencil, often in notebooks. And then what I do is take those notebooks and transcribe them to my computer, like in a beautiful private library or a quiet place that you can go to. And there are days I wake up and the first thing I do is Athenaeum, 9 a.m. to noon. This is the one day this week you're going to be able to do it. Better go. And I just wake up in the morning and go, it's not happening. And I am here to let you know that if you take some of my advice and this happens to you, I don't want to sound presumptuous and say that you're in good company, but if it's not working that day, I would say try to have some flexibility incorporating this new rhythm into your life. Make an effort to set the time aside and everything, but have a little. You don't want to be really lazy or delay it every single time. You don't want to wake up every like that one Friday where you have a few hours. You don't want to wake up every single Friday and go, I think I'll, put this off for the fifth Friday in a row, which would kind of get to one of my next points, which would be the whole almost I don't this idea of do you really feel as though the work is going to come out no matter what? In that sense, that can be an intense process, and then you might be sending text messages to yourself on your phone with bits of dialogue for the work, voice memos of lines of poetry. I know I certainly do things like this. And in that case, you might have a whole hodgepodge of notes all over the place. And maybe then in the evening, you can try to get all of your notes and keep a file open. Get into an idea of scaffolding, is the way I call it. We have lots of great architecture in Philadelphia, and there's not a single piece of it that didn't begin with a really concrete plan, scaffolding, and things that themselves may not be all that much to look at aesthetically, but are nonetheless vital. And so the scaffolding idea is another. Perhaps rather than saying, I want to write a 200-page novel by the end of this year and I'm doing it no matter what about the idea of, I want to start off with a list of maybe 8 bullet points that roughly say what about 25 pages could do? Maybe you get that going and you go, all right, for the next page, maybe I'll try to break it up into like 16 bullet points. Maybe I'll try to break it up into 32 bullet points. Maybe it could be 32 chapters. So that mathematical scaffolding, keep that in mind too. A clear idea of the influences by way of absorption rather than sitting down with text you'd like to emulate beside you. What I mean here is, let's give an example of something I hope to be teaching in a year or two, John Milton and some other correlative poetry, and the examination of early modern literature in other disciplines. Now, I could be reading Paradise Lost and say, some light bulb has gone off and I really want to go, or I should say the first time I read Paradise Lost years ago, it made me want to go out and write a kind of epic poem. It was just the way it made me feel. I'd never thought of writing an epic poem. I don't know if many people in the 21st century are. I kind of hope they are, but the main thing is that feeling that you might get from a book or two. I would say get to know that feeling more intimately. I'm just using John Milton, but you can use every author that makes you want to write. Get to know more about that author, their other works. If you're not crazy about their other works, spend more time with the work that you find really is something that you want to work in the spirit of. Secondly, I know that some professors have very strong feelings about doing this, but this is more for literary scholarship. And this is getting to know about the life of the author. Sometimes we could do this and say, wow, I had no idea I would despise this person as much as I do. What I'm saying is not to read about the life of the author for the sake of liking them or not, but to get a better idea of how a particular work was constructed. How did they go about writing it? Were they writing it in absolute poverty, completely unknown? Were they born into a Harvard or Oxford family and just sort of groomed into this is what you're going to do and you're going to have plenty of leisure and comfort to do it? Um, get an idea about it and think about it and think, I wonder if I can kind of emulate certain things that I'm doing in my life to make that sort of a similar process um, in construction and to really cultivate mentally and imaginatively in a similar way. Um, as another thing that I would say to that end would be that the history of the book itself that really inspires you could be a great twofold endeavor because it could become something that you not only just love and enjoy reading about. A lot of great literary works are part of, well, are always part of another historical moment. That moment could have a ton of scholarship written on it. It could be something that you say, "Hey, this author is completely neglected. Um, I want to change that." And perhaps you could carve out a path for yourself, saying, "I want to give this author much more credit than has been given, or I want to correct what I see are these wrong or maybe biased or just very kind of cookie cutter approaches to lesser works, works that, unlike Milton, that don't have like an entire portion of the library dedicated to them. I've found personally minor writers, obscure writers, quiet lives, internationally and across the centuries have probably influenced my own aesthetic work more than the epics. And so that's something to keep in mind too, to perpetually research literature. What are your what are your influences? That for me could have just been a 10-second lecture or presentation here in and of itself. Finding out the influences of my influences. Well, I then when I figured that out a few years ago, I suddenly have all of my life dedicated to this now, more or less. Teaching it, talking about it, reading it, rereading it, talking with people, living it. And so that's something to keep in mind. Some of the ways I'll wrap it up here would be you'll probably notice I haven't offered any advice on publishing, which maybe seems like the most important thing here. Um, I would say that it's not. And again, I'm not just saying that to just kind of weasel my way out of giving good advice on it. But I'll give you a personal anecdote. The first small book that I published, I wrote in 3 days, and it took me 5 years to find a publisher for it. So just meditate on that thought for a second. And this is not to draw any attention to myself or anything, but that you could feel an absolute rush and think that right after I just finished this thing, it's a prose poem, it could be a novella, and it all just came out of me. I want to just go and find a publisher and make this a bestseller next year. Um, hey, if that happens, let me know. I'd love to have your autograph. At the same time, I would say worry about writing the book. That is the most important thing. If you want to get business contracts set up and that sort of thing, um, I feel like that's advice that would kind of transcend this discussion. I wanted to just kind of give you some inspiration and some logical advice about getting the project started and some ideas you might have. So in order to not really get ahead of ourselves here, we'll just kind of leave it at that for now. And so just to wrap it up, your Well, actually, to wrap it up, rather than this is because this has actually gone on a little longer than I thought. If you think anything here has been helpful, of course, save the video. At the same time, email me, shoot me an email me. We could have a Zoom chat. We could meet in my office for office hours, whatever. I'd be happy to talk to you about anything here that I could help with, help clarify, any advice I could give. And for any of you that want to embark on a kind of literary life or literary adventure, really, um, I wish you way more than luck, as a wise man once said, and look forward to helping you however I can.